Hey everybody, welcome to Awarenezzz Podcast. This is going to be the first episode. This is Camilo.
This is Mats.
And today we have a really special guest, Randy. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for inviting me today.
Yeah, so for everybody who doesn't know, Randy is a tennis player. He's a student athlete for college. So Randy, tells a little bit about yourself. How did this tennis journey started?
Well, as Camilo said, I'm a tennis player here at Indiana Tech. I was born in Honduras, which is a country in Central America, but I live in the Caribbean in a small island called the Dominican Republic. I started playing tennis when I was 10 with my best friend. Nothing too special, but I started liking the way things were going, and my parents were liking it too, and I took it to a competitive level. And my main goal since I was young was to get a college scholarship so I can play tennis here in the United States and also study a major in engineering.
Right. It's really interesting. So when you started playing, you weren't looking like to achieve anything with tennis, that you were just doing it because you liked it?
I mean, my parents always said that they wanted me to be a high performance athlete. No matter what I did, I did karate for 2 years, I did swimming for 3, but when I started playing tennis, I started getting really competitive. I got really into it. I wanted to compete. I was telling my parents, and they said, well, let's just stick with it. They started getting me a lot of like gear, like good rackets, good gloves, good coaches. The academy was nice, and it was close to my house, which was convenient as well. So I think that's how I got started. It was a combination of me liking the sport and it being convenient because it was close to my house. A lot of my friends from school were playing tennis at that moment, so I just stuck with it.
Was there a lot of pressure, like growing up, or your parents were all like, you need to perform, but it's not, if you don't perform, it's still alright?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my parents were never pressuring me, but I think I was pressuring myself a little bit too much because, like, deep down, I kind of wanted to play at the professional level. Like, most athletes don't really tell these things to everybody, but deep down, every athlete has a small hope that they will make it to a professional level. So seeing my friends, like some of them doing better, doing worse, would pressure myself. I always like to be the best at any environment where I'm at. So yeah, I think I've always put a little bit of pressure upon myself, which is good and bad.
I think it's very important because a lot of parents trying to like tell their sons that they have to do this, they have to do this sport, but it's for me it's mainly, and this is what worked for me, is mainly trying to. My parents always gave me options, right? So I was in baseball, I was in soccer, I also did swimming, but it's just giving the kid the options so then he can choose as you found out that it was tennis that what you like,
Yeah.
and then you end up performing better than the other sports because you like it. And you also mentioned having friends in the also playing tennis. How important was it for you in that process to have people in your environment that also did the same thing?
Yeah, for me, it's really important. Well, to this day, like for me, it's really important that wherever I train, I have friends. I don't like training by myself. Tennis is a very lonely sport, and that can have a big toll on you. It can create a little bit of a social barrier with you and others. So since I was little, I've always liked having my friends around. And when some of them who are a little bit older than me went to college to play or graduated high school and quit tennis, it was tough because less people were playing with me. Some days I was training by myself. And when COVID hit, obviously it was a big deal back home because we're a third world country. But yeah, I think having friends in the environment helps a lot, competitively and also like environmentally.
Also, like every time you wanted to give up tennis completely?
I mean,
yes.
I had this thing where every time, like from 10 to 16 years old, every time I lost in a tournament, obviously tennis is a very crappy sport. Only one person wins, so I was a big loser. I lost almost every weekend, except for some of them. And every time I lost, I would tell like my coaches and my parents, like, I'm done. I can't play this thing anymore. And then on Monday, I was back on the courts, and they were like, "Oh, didn't you quit? Why are you here?" So yeah.
Well, then in that moment, what were your parents like telling you, or your coaches? They just said like, yeah, you do you, or they like try to motivate you?
I mean, my coach was always motivating me to keep playing, but my parents like sometimes said like, do you really think like this sport is good for you? Like sometimes I would get really sad, really frustrated with the sport, and my parents could see that it was like I didn't want to go to parties, I didn't want to do anything else but play tennis, and I was getting really angry. I was having a lot of outbursts and breakdowns when I was like 14, 16, mid-teenage years, and my parents were like, if this thing, like if you can't behave better on the court, and if we see that you're struggling a lot, we're gonna pull you off. So they got me a sports psychologist to help me with that aspect, which really helped a lot, to be honest.
That's really interesting, because I was actually gonna ask you, like you mentioned these breakdowns you had. What are those key factors that made you go through this? Because I see a lot of young athletes that they have another responsibilities. They're going through social life, everything a teenager goes through, their academics, and also if they're an athlete, their athletics. How did you manage to manage the stress between all these factors? And as you say, you were having these breakdowns. What were those key factors that really helped you keep thriving and took you where you are right now, which is a student athlete, which is something a lot of people want to do?
Well, at first I was having big outbursts because I was getting used to being competitive. So at first you're not used to that high performance level. So when you lose, it's kind of a bigger deal than if you lose like at some, I don't know, intramural tournament, because there is more pressure. So at first, every time I lost, I was crying, I was breaking my rackets, I was insulting everybody around me. I was really a brat in that sense. But something that really helped me was the sports psychologist. His name is Manuel, just shouting him out. He's a really great guy. He helped me learn a key thing that I think applies for every sport, no matter what it is. It's a term called intangible. It means something you cannot control. So there are factors in every sport, soccer, basketball, tennis, that are intangible. Say the wind, say your opponent cheating, say your opponent trash talking, say your leg hurting, say whatever it is, these things you cannot control. And I think those were the big factors that were affecting me. Like I was crying because, today I would have won, but the wind was so strong, so I hate everything. And I think the sports psychologist helped me understand that these things you cannot control, so focus on what you can control, which is your emotions, your mental state, how strong you are, or how fit you are, how much you train, and those things.
How long did it take to use like the methods your psychologist gave you?
To this day, I still struggle to sometimes focus myself and be more mature, but it's not something that you're gonna master. Even if you're a professional athlete, these things will have an effect on you, because some days you're more mentally strong than others. But you get used to it, and obviously you get better. Like to this day, I think at the college level, I haven't had a big outburst or a big tantrum. So at least for me, like for some people that's normal, but for me that's kind of a good thing that I'm proud of.
And there's a saying I like a lot, which is focus on the inputs, not on the outcome. So if you focus on what you're doing and what you can control, as you mentioned, on putting in the work, putting in the hours, and also just trying your best, then one or not, the outcome is gonna come, right? Because sometimes there are so many intangibles, as you mentioned, that may play a part whether you win or not. But then what you can control is what you actually put. And another thing I want to revisit is, you said that it's not like, even high performance athletes, they still struggle today. So it's not about just being perfect, like all the time you have to be mentally strong. It's about recognizing when you're not mentally strong and then doing something to change it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is something, I also had a sports psychologist, and because I went through an injury, very long injury, so I had to go with her, and she also mentioned this, like it's about being conscious about what you think and where you're thinking things, and then doing something to change it. And I also wanted to ask you, when was it that moment in your life when you said like, okay, I can take this to another level, I can compete at a higher level, and you decided to come here to study?
I mean, there's a moment in every athlete's career as a juvenile when you have to make that big decision where, well, at least for people who are like really good, where you're gonna say like, oh, do I want to be a professional? Do I want to be a student athlete? Or do I just want to quit after high school because I want to focus on my studies and focus on other things other than that sport? So I think when I was 16 or 17, when the pandemic hit back home, it hit really hard. We couldn't play tennis for 6-8 months, especially in my city. A lot of my friends had just left the country to study abroad. Some of them were student athletes. So that left me with no playing time and also less people to play with. So I kind of wasn't really focused on tennis at the moment, or even school, because everything was online. I was more just doing my thing, waiting for the pandemic to end. But once I entered senior year of high school, I came into the realization, I saw my friends talking about like big schools, applications, SATs, all of that big stuff, because I used to study at American high school that was inputted back home in the Dominican Republic. So when I saw that, I remembered, I kind of forgot. I was like, oh, I want to be a student athlete. I forgot.
Tennis.
Yeah, I need to get that scholarship. So since the pandemic hit, as I said, there were no tournaments. I had very few rankings, very few information to give to the coaches so that they knew how I played. So I had a little bit less to work with than other people in other countries, since like here in the United States, some people didn't even stop training once the pandemic hit because they had their own thing going on. So I think the best option was that I saw a friend of mine who worked at an agent with a sports agency. So basically an agent does a lot of the work for you. He helps find contacts, helps set up meetings with coaches. So I enrolled in it. It's called University Sports Program in Florida. It's a very good program. It's completely online. You don't really see the people in person. I was working with this coach. He was from, agent/coach. He was from Cuba. He helped me set up a lot of contacts. Obviously, I had to decide what I wanted to study. I guess I wanted to be a doctor, but I didn't want to study for so long. So I stuck with biomedical engineering, which is basically implant and medical devices. So I took a little bit of a combination of studies and how good I was at the point, and I ended up landing here. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it in that sense.
What was like the biggest switch, like when you came to America, like coming from home, not a country?
The biggest what?
Like biggest switch, like change.
I'd say the weather at first. I had never been in such a cold environment. I don't mind it, but it was really tough, at least the first year, because I wasn't really expecting it to be that cold. I was like, yeah, I love the cold. I have air conditioning in my house, but yeah, it has nothing to do with it. It's a very aggressive cold up here in the north.
But other than that, you find it pretty easy to adapt here?
Yeah, I kind of like it. It's really similar back home. Obviously, the language barrier, but I've been speaking English since I'm 2 years old, so it's not really a challenge for me. But I know for a lot of people it is, and a lot of countries are not as similar to the United States, especially people who come from Europe. So yeah.
Okay, so now we talked about when you started, all the transition from the Dominican Republic to here to the U.S. Now we're here. How do you manage to do well in the academics, do well in the athletics? Because there's a lot of student athletes that struggle with that part of balancing both responsibilities they have. So how do you manage to keep both in a high level?
So obviously a big aspect of being a student athlete is whether you play Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, or NAIA, as is this one. And obviously Division 1 is more concentrated on the sports, and then they make it flexible so that you can study. A lot of trips, a lot of online classes, a lot of exemptions from homeworks and quizzes and all that sort of stuff. So it's very challenging. At least for me, I wasn't at least back when I was getting recruited, I wasn't at the level where I could play at a top D1 or even a mid-range one. So my options were not really good Division 1s, some decent Division 2s, and obviously NAIA, which is like the equivalent of Division 2. And obviously, as I said, I study engineering, so that kind of lowers my list of colleges where I can end up at. And once I came here, I found it really good, the idea that I could study and at the same time I could train, but I wasn't sacrificing either of. It was really well balanced when I came here. I had time to study, I had time to train. It wasn't really very demanding in either aspect. So I think being here really helped. I think other colleges probably have different ways of demanding that student athlete life. So
would you say the college made it pretty easy for you to manage these both parts of your life?
Yeah, I'd say when I came here, I was really impressed by that. And I myself, obviously as a student athlete, athletes are usually more disciplined than people who do not play sports. Not saying that they all are, but they have efficient time management skills. So I already had that to my advantage. So I think I used that pretty well, and to this day I'm doing pretty good on both aspects.
Do you find it easy? Let me reframe it. So what method, or do you have any specific method to manage your time between sports and also athletics and also your social life?
Yeah, I think my idea has always been, if I have time for it, I'll do it right now. Okay. So even if the homework is due 3 months from now, if I have time now to do it, I'll do it. And that way, when I have other things to do, I don't have those things that are due like 2 weeks from now. So I can do other things like go to the gym, go socialize, have dinner with my friends, go out to parties, whatever. So I think if you have time to do stuff, homework, gym, whatever it is, extracurricularly, do it. Go for it.
Yeah, that's really important, because sometimes even in the class I see people that are in class, and they're just watching Netflix series or a movie, and then they say they complain that they have to study 4 hours when they're at home. But when you're in class, you're already there. You might as well just put all your attention there. So if you're in a moment that you don't have anything else to do but just do something, well, you might as well do it at the moment, and then you'll have time to do another things.
Yeah, I also see a lot of people saying oh, I have so much stuff to do, and then once they sit on their desk, they procrastinate. They look at their phone for 2 hours. They write 2 pages in the span of 6 hours. And I think that something I do that's really good, at least for me, is to, let's say I need to do a homework of physics. I work on that physics homework for 1 hour, but only working on that physics homework. No music, no YouTube videos, no Netflix, nothing else, no distractions. I put my phone far away from me, do not disturb. And then once I finish that hour, no matter how much work I have, I take a 30-minute break and then keep going until I finish.
You also work as a tutor. Do you think it helps you to relearn the stuff when you teach other kids or other students?
I mean, yeah, I'm a tutor for the Human Anatomy Lab, which is a class that it teaches you basically all the bones of the body, all the structures of the bones, all the arteries, all the veins, all the muscles, all the tendons. So yeah, now that I started in August, it's really helped me refresh my memory. Also, I thought I was not going to remember everything, but actually I do remember a good amount of what I learned. And it's obviously a good opportunity to work on campus, earn some money, and help students learn something that I am passionate about, which is medicine and the human body.
Sorry, coach.
Very nice. And you said you thought you were not gonna remember. Was it probably because I read on a book that you already learned one thing, but once you relearn it again, it's really easy for you to understand
actually,
it.
That is true. Like now that I learned it, like per se twice,
Yeah.
I think that now it'll be easier for me to remember or teach people without even having to look at the book. So I'm gonna probably be a tutor for that same class next year. So it'll be probably easier. I can help students better and I can show off my tutoring skills better, per se.
Yeah, so you mentioned you're planning to keep being a tutor for next year. Now that you mentioned the future, what's Randy looking forward to in the next 2 years?
That's a good question. It's also a bad one because I think a lot of people think that you need to answer this question, but I think I'm just gonna see what life has for me when the time comes. I think I like to take life one step at a time, with one day at a time. So once I graduate, I'll see if I have job offers. I'll see if I don't. I'll see if I want to do a master's, if I want to do a PhD, if I want to keep working in this branch of engineering. Who knows? Like, I think people should never close doors on other things just because, I don't know, like, just because you're studying astrophysics doesn't mean that you do not, like, you don't know if you're gonna end up being a veterinary in 3 years. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, I think life is more about just letting it flow instead of like you trying to like mold and shape the things that you want, like force it out. So yeah, I think let's just see what happens.
Do you plan on keep going to play tennis, or you don't know yet?
I have one eligibility year left because I redshirted my freshman year. So I think I might want to do a master's at another school, maybe a Division I school, and see like how is that Division I life where you focus a lot on your sport and like a lot of intense trainings to see how good of a tennis player I could be, like reach that like prime potential.
Well, Randy, it was really nice having you here, man. Any advice you have for the people watching on the experiences you've lived as a student athlete? Of course, you've provided us a lot of value, but any specific thing you might want to leave to the audience right now?
I think there's this saying that my sports psychologist used to say to me, which is more applied for student athletes, but it says pressure is a privilege, which is also framed in the main court, the center court. It's called the Arthur Ashe Stadium at the US Open. It says pressure is a privilege, which is good, at least for people who pressure themselves a lot and underperform because of their pressure, but understanding that having the opportunity to have pressure, expectations, and the opportunity of performing in front of people and even to yourself is a gift. So do not take that for granted.
Perfect, man. It was really nice having you here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you guys for watching the podcast today. As I said, it's the first episode of the podcast. You can expect a lot of more special guests as Randy. We're trying to provide as much value as possible. And follow us and stay tuned for more content like this.